Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Books with Nate. And today I plan to go over a few series that I kind of DNF'd, but do plan to reread at some point in the future. So this isn't necessarily I didn't like these series. I definitely did, but I definitely want to revisit these at some point. I just have no plans to revisit them right now, but they're definitely at the top of the list for now. And before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe if you want, and comment down below about some series that you want to revisit. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get into it. So, first up on the list is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I read the first four books in this series. This is a 7-book series. Well, I guess 8 technically. But yeah, I really loved this series when I was reading it. This series follows Roland de something. He is the last gunslinger in this world, and you follow him, and it's sort of Stephen King's take on Lord of the Rings, essentially, the Fellowship. And you kind of see these kind of wacky, very interesting characters join him, and just it's all very out there. It was really good when I was reading it. But yeah, you follow Roland and the what's called the quartet, essentially, and you kind of get this very interesting journey towards the Dark Tower. It's a dying world almost. It's a mix of sci-fi, fantasy, horror. It's just kind of all jumbled together in this really zany and really well done way. I really loved it when I was reading it. I set it down just because I think I started Malazan after I finished book 4, and then that kind of overtook my mental capacity for like out there fantasy stuff. So yeah, I want to revisit this at some point, probably in like 2025 ish. Um, I I loved the first 4 books, but I just don't have a plan to revisit it right now. But I do want to soon. And before I forget, I definitely recommend reading this series. It's not talked about enough on YouTube or on social media. It's really good. It's really well done. Stephen King, I think, has some great prose. He's a really good writer. Uh, I know, hot take, even though he's like one of the most famous writers ever. But I think he's just like a really good writer overall, and I can't recommend this series enough. So next up, we have the Saxon Tales by Bernard Cornwell, and this follows Uhtred, son of Uhtred, as he kind of navigates the waters of, is he a Dane or is he an Anglo-Saxon? This takes place during like right before and around and during the reign of Alfred the Great, and it's a very tumultuous time in England, as the Danes have kind of conquered half of England essentially, and they're fighting constantly, and there's politics and all this other stuff. But you get a first person narrative from this character Uhtred, who's kind of a badass warrior who is kind of like an interesting character too. Not the greatest guy in the world, but I think he has his qualities that you can admire, or rather, find depth in. Yeah, I want to revisit this. I only read the first book, but I really liked it. I just, again, it was one of those cases of like, I was reading some other stuff. I didn't really want to like continue this series at that moment. But yeah, it's a good historical fiction, and each book is like 300 pages or so. So it's not like a huge read or anything. But yeah, I want to revisit this at some point, and I liked it, and yeah, it's a good time. So next up, we have Foundation by Isaac Asimov, the Foundation series, I guess you could say. I read the first 2 books in this series, and I like the first one here, Foundation, which also I should have grabbed the other 2, but there's like kind of these cool 70s Ace, I think it was Ace, no Avon paperbacks, which I just think are really interesting. But yeah, I read the first two. I really liked the first one. Second one kind of got a little, I guess you could say, I don't know, metaphorical at times, with one character in particular. I also listened to it on audio, so maybe that wasn't the best use of my time. But yeah, no, I liked it. It was just kind of like a eh. And I did plan to read the third book, but I think the second book just left a bad taste in my mouth. I also think I just need to focus more on that second book a little bit to like really appreciate what's being written. Um, yeah, it's a series that is really, you could say, foundational for science fiction. You can see a lot of this in something like Star Wars. You follow kind of the pinnacle of a declining empire, essentially. It's very, it draws on the Roman Empire a lot. You could definitely see that here. Uh, it's kind of predicting, you follow this, start with this one character who is a psycho historian who's essentially combined psychology and history to predict the future, essentially. And he essentially predicts the fall of this galactic empire. And now we see the consequences of it, or we see, he tries to lay out plans for how you can bring stability back to the galaxy. This takes place like thousands of years in the future. I don't know. But it was good. And it's one of those series where I'm like, this is a classic. This is, something that's important to the genre. That's something I want to get more into in my reading, which I didn't really mention in my previous sort of like video. But it's something I want to get back into of, seeing the history of the genre. And I think this is a series that I want to revisit sometime soon. And next up is maybe a bit of a cop-out. I don't know. I'll let you decide. But it's the expanded, essentially, Tolkien's Legendarium, I guess you could say. I know Christopher Tolkien kind of helped write, his son kind of helped write a lot of these. But yeah, I do want to revisit Middle-earth, and especially revisit revisit for the first time these kind of extended works around Middle-earth. So, we have the Silmarillion, which I never read. Well, I got like halfway through, I think, in college, and then I was like, dude, you're in college, you have other shit to read, don't read this right now. And then The Children of Hurin, which I actually read in high school, and I loved it, but I just haven't read it since. There's Beren and Luthien, and The Fall of Numenor, and a few other books. And I know some of those are just like collected notes, or, kind of several stories kind of jumbled together. But I do want to visit those or revisit those and get into them because, I love Middle-earth and I love Tolkien. And, this is definitely something I want to get back into in the future. Again, no plan for it right now, but it's like Middle-earth is top of the priority list in terms of like down the line at some point. And then finally, we have perhaps one of the biggest series, and that is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I read the first three books in this series, and I enjoyed it. I was having a good time with it. I think The Dragon Reborn, the third book, kind of didn't go where I wanted to go. And then I started reading, I think, Robin Hobb, and I think I started reading, The Dark Tower, or getting more into The Dark Tower. And I was just like, I don't want to pick this up again for now. So I haven't read it in a few years, and I want to start to reread this at some point in the future, probably in 2025, once I get past Malazan, and then just some trilogies, and just trying to like have fun with my reading a little bit more. But it's something I do want to revisit because I did like it. I know the first book is a bit derivative of Lord of the Rings, but it definitely really found its own sort of pace and its own sort of story in book two, and book two was definitely the highlight. The Great Hunt was like, I thought that was really good, and it really found its own footing, I think. And yeah, so I guess if you don't know what Wheel Time is about, it's this really epic fantasy. It's like 14, 15 books, and you follow, Rand al'Thor, who is kind of this, character who's, farm boy turned hero. And then there's also other characters, a lot of other characters that you're following, who were kind of in his party originally. And they kind of go on their own heroic journey themselves. And there's a magic system that, where if men use it, it's essentially like a tainted magic, and it turns men evil, and then they use it for evil, and so only women can use the magic. And it's this very interesting sort of magical society going on. And then there's a really in-depth world building too. It's like great world building. I wouldn't say it's the best, but I think it's really well done and really interesting, and definitely up there. Yeah, it's really cool, and it's kind of cool to see like Dune in there. It's cool to see just some other like influential series in this series as well. So yeah, Wheel of Time at some point, not anytime soon, but 2025. Now that I just committed to a bunch of series, yeah, that's it from me. So again, make sure to like and subscribe if you want to support what I do here. Comment down below what you're reading, or what you DNF'd, or what you want to read or something. I don't know, up to you. And yeah, thanks for watching, and thanks for listening to me just talk for a bit and ramble. And I will talk to you soon.